Hello, everyone.
Well,
Hi, go ahead, Sarah. I'll let you.
oh, no, not
make
at
your
all. I
statement.
was just going to say welcome to the ASAP program. We are now in our installment. We're going to be focusing a little bit on the Writing Center as well as the library. We have our director of the Writing Center with us, Steve Smith, and our distance learning librarian, Laura Harris, with us today. So we're going to hear a little bit from them, some common issues, questions, concerns that they hear from many students. So they're going to touch on some of those points. If at any time any student that joins has questions, we're happy to hear from them. So we may pause just to check in. So at this point, I would really like to just pass this off to Steve to sort of get it started with the Writing Center. Thanks, Steve, for joining.
Thank you, Sarah. Hi, everyone. What I want to do is just share with you a little bit of information about the Writing Center and what we offer. So I am going to share the Writing Center homepage with all of you. One of the things that I always like to stress about the Writing Center is that if you're physically able to come to the Writing Center, we help students from across the disciplines, as well as any class ranks. We help freshmen, sophomores, juniors, seniors, graduate students. Our tutors are well trained. They're very, very strong writers themselves. Most of them have very, very high grade point averages. And I'm picky about who I hire to work in the Writing Center too. Most of the students are extremely strong writers outside of their disciplines, as well as really skilled writers in their majors and minors too. So they're really ready, willing, and able to help anyone who comes into the Writing Center with really any kind of writing needs. Anybody in the Writing Center can help you, but I do have a couple links on the Writing Center homepage that I would like to show you to maybe try to pick the best tutor possible to work with. We help. You don't have to have a draft of a paper, by the way, to get help in the Writing Center. It's very common for students to come into the Writing Center and get help getting started on a paper. Maybe get help understanding the prompt, interpreting the prompt, perhaps do some brainstorming based on the writing assignment, maybe work on a rough outline, maybe work on a tentative thesis statement. And we're not an editing service either. I really want to make that clear too. So if you come into the Writing Center to get any kind of help, whether it's getting started on a paper, doing some, brainstorming, outlining, what have you, be ready to have a conversation about that writing assignment, about that paper. There's not probably a college writing center in the country that's going to say it's an editing service. It's really important that folks visiting the Writing Center really are prepared to have a dialogue, a conversation about their paper. On the Writing Center homepage too, you can see I update this from time to time, but this is the fall semester drop-in schedule for the Writing Center. And if I ever have to add any new times or change any times here for drop-in assistance, I'll do so right here on the homepage, as well as on the OLS site. OLS is the name of my office that oversees all three of our centers, the Writing Center, the Tutoring Center, as well as the STEM Center. So you can find this information on the OLS homepage too. But drop-in tutoring, of course, there's no appointment needed. So you can see I've got quite a few of the tutors who are available at different days and times throughout the week to help folks that didn't really have an opportunity to make an appointment. So this is great. You can just drop in and hopefully whatever tutor's working drop-ins will be able to see you right away. Sometimes as we get later in the semester and students get busier and busier. Sometimes you might have to wait a little bit if you do physically come into the Writing Center for help. But a lot of times that wait isn't that long. You just sign in, and when the drop-in tutor is ready, that drop-in tutor will see you. Down at the bottom of the homepage, you'll see a link, Tutor Bios. I'm going to click on that. This is an alphabetical list of all of the writing tutors who are presently working in the Writing Center from semester to semester. And as you scroll down through this, you can see there's a lot of different writing tutors from a lot of different backgrounds. I don't just hire typical English majors to work in the Writing Center. You can see Dominic is a computer science major, Anthony, broadcasting and mass communication, Khadijah, communications major, minors, human development, as well as philosophy, and so on down the line. And then underneath the tutor bios, I also have this link, courses that the writing tutors have taken with some degree of writing in them. So if you click on that, you'll see an alphabetical order list of courses by abbreviated titles. If you don't see a name, one or more names of tutors underneath any of these courses, it's because at one time I had a writing tutor who took that course that had writing in it. The tutor graduated, but I left the course in here in case I could ever plug names in down the line. So as we scroll down, you can see Anthropology 344, Rosalie, Syracuse had that, who is presently working in the Writing Center. Art 350, Murrin has had that, and so on. So you can scroll down through this too. But again, this is just, a resource to give you some kind of an idea if a student has had a course that you're interested in getting help in. By no means do you have to find someone who has taken the course. A lot of times a student might, one of the tutors hasn't taken the course, but any of these students are certainly qualified to help you with any of your writing needs. But I think if you can think about the kind of course that you're doing the writing in and try to look to see if I have a writing tutor with that major, with that minor, maybe took the course, that's probably something to consider first and foremost. If you go up and click, I don't have a way to access TrackCloud, which is the platform that we use for making appointments. My supervisor wants to keep that access in our office's homepage. So if you go to the Office of Learning Services and click that, this is where you can find the link to TrackCloud if you are able to come to campus and you want to make an appointment. If you want to know, if it's pretty easy to make an appointment online, but if you would like to look at a video on making an appointment using TrackCloud, my colleague Casey Town put this like 3-minute video together on how to make an appointment with really nice pictures and so on. So it's really easy to follow this process if you do run into any kinds of glitches when you try to make an appointment. I'm going to stop my screen share right there. And I think what I'll do, some of you might have already heard a little bit about Smart Thinking, the online tutoring service that we now have that any students can access, and it's free. But I'll review it again. Smart or Thinking Storm.
Yes.
Yeah, I know. You know what it is, because Smart Thinking is something that we experimented with
yeah,
a number of years ago. And boy, one of my colleagues called Thinking Storm Thundercloud by mistake in an email, and we got the biggest kick out of that. But anyway, it is Thinking Storm. And it's, it's new, but they seem to have a lot of very credible tutors who are available to help. Something like, I don't know, I think it was 85% of the tutors who work for Thinking Storm have advanced degrees. They all have at least a bachelor's degree. They don't have any drop-in availability for writing Okay, they do for like for some courses they have drop-in availability, but not for writing. But for writing, you can do an in-person asynchronous meeting with a tutor online and get some feedback. You know, you can go in and chat with that tutor. You can also submit your paper and get asynchronous feedback from a tutor in Thinking Storm. There's like a brief form that you will complete and put as much, they like you to put as much information in that form as you possibly can. And then you can put your paper in there and send it off. And somebody from Thinking Storm will review your paper, offer constructive criticism. And usually the turnaround time is about 12 hours, which I think is rather quick, to be honest with you. But again, you know, if you need immediate feedback on a paper, submitting a paper to Thinking Storm, you know, you might have to wait a little bit and really be familiar with your deadlines and so on. And that's something I might talk a little bit about after Laura finishes talking about the library, different kinds of challenges that a lot of you face with your writing. And something like planning seems to be something that a lot of students struggle with, is they just simply don't start their papers early enough for whatever reasons. But for Thinking Storm, there's a link in your Bright space at the top in the tab, so you can get into Thinking Storm that way. They offer 24/7 feedback, which I think is wonderful too. Let's see. I'm trying to think of something I might have missed. Tutors in Thinking Storm can help you with a variety of different things, like following the assignment, the prompt. They can help you with expectations. So I get the sense that you don't necessarily always have to have a paper. Like if you want to meet with someone who works in Thinking Storm, you know, you might be able to just make an appointment and have a conversation about your writing assignment with that writing tutor and get some feedback on how you might proceed with that paper. Just like what we do in the Writing Center at Oswego. You can get feedback from smart thinking folks on your thesis statements, maybe the evidence that you want to use in a paper. You know, you've got to use some outside sources perhaps, and you want to know if your outside sources are credible and strong. You know how well the paper's organized and so on. You know how clear is the paper, the clarity and coherence and things like that. And they can also help you with sentence level skills like grammar, internal punctuation marks, mechanics, and so on. Even formatting a paper. If you're working on a research paper and say it's an APA or an MLA or Chicago style, you can probably get some kind of help with just the formatting of that kind of a paper too. I guess I can stop there. Sarah, Laura, unless you have some questions for me at this time, I'll just let Laura go ahead and talk about how she can be helpful and how the library can be helpful.
I think that was a wonderful introduction to the Writing Center and overview. So we definitely appreciate that very much, Steve. I'm sure we can get back to some other typical questions that you might hear from students or other pieces that maybe pop into your head as Laura is presenting a little bit about the library and research and what that looks for adult students that might be commuting or our online students that are accessing the library and the distance learning different pieces that we have through the library. So Laura, this is sort of your cue to take it away.
Great, thank you. One thing that I would like to say that came to mind while Steve was talking is that when you are working on a research assignment, it is best if you can look at the research that is out there first and then make a conclusion, rather than looking for sources to confirm your opinions. I know that's not always easy, especially if you are working on things at the last minute, but I think that goes hand in hand with what Steve was saying, the more you can plan ahead, the better it will serve you. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. I am on my iPad, so this will look a little bit different on a full computer screen. So this is the library homepage, and basically one thing I want you to know is that this will be changing. Hopefully at the beginning of spring semester, we will have a new web page up. But the things I want to point out are still going to be available with the new version of the website. They just may be a little bit in a different place. The search box is actually something we're planning on highlighting and making even more visible than it is right now. So there are basically two ways you can find resources. The first way is just to use the search box on the homepage, but you can also click resources by subject. And there is a link at both the top of my screen there, kind of on the left, but there's also the green button that says resources by subject. And I will go into those in a little bit. But let's say you are searching for a particular topic, your paper is on a particular topic. And of course, I'm blanking on a topic right now. I will do something I worked with another class on earlier this week, and that's the Cuban educational system. So let's search for that. So this search tool actually searches several of the library's resources. If you're not familiar with sort of our terminology, we use the phrase databases a lot, that are basically collections of articles, and most of them are subject specific. And the nice thing about this system is that it actually searches multiple things, multiple databases at once. So I want to point out the filters. If you're on a regular full-size screen, you will automatically see the filters on the left, but I'm going to click on the little funnel here, and that will give us our what we call limiters here. A lot of times you can use publication date to make sure you're getting the most up-to-date research that's available. But what I want to draw your attention to are some of the things under the only show heading. So for those of you who don't have time to come into the library, you can click available online and it will show you just the resources that are available online. The majority of those are going to be articles, just because the sheer number, there's probably millions, maybe even billions of articles we have access to. So the articles are probably going to outnumber the books, but if you click available online, it will show you any ebooks we have on that topic as well. The other one I want to point out is the peer-reviewed journals. If you are not familiar with peer-reviewed journals, basically articles in those journals are written by experts, often professors at colleges and universities, or people who do research in that field. And then when they're submitted to these journals, they're reviewed by other experts in the field. The downside of peer-reviewed journals is that the whole process of doing an experiment, writing about it, having it reviewed by others, it can be kind of time consuming. So sometimes the information is a few years old by the time you get it. But the benefit of peer-reviewed journal articles is that they are usually going to be among the most credible sources you can find because they're written by experts. I want to show you, I'm going to click on books here because I'd like to show you a specific tool here that would be helpful for those of you who can come into campus and those of you who may live close to the Syracuse campus. You can see most of the first few results here are available online, so you can just click available online. But let's look at number 4, pursuing power. So let's say that you're very busy, you can't spend a lot of time in the library looking for this, or perhaps you live closer to Syracuse, what you can do is request this book. And let's see, I'm going to log in. And what you can do is click this link that says request for pickup. It does usually take anywhere from 1 to 3 business days for the Oswego campus, and it does take us, can take us up to a week for the Syracuse campus, and that's only because we use a courier service that only goes down to the campus once a week. But either way, you can just click on that link. And if you want to pick it up at the Syracuse campus, just click that box and then click send request. And if you want to pick it up at Oswego, just leave it unchecked and click send request. So hopefully that is something that will be helpful to you guys, regardless of where you are located. The other thing I'd really like to draw your attention to is on the library homepage. Oh, I'm sorry, before I get into that, I was going to show you the resources by subject. So let's go ahead and look at those. Basically, these are guides that the librarians have created to sort of curate the resources that are going to be most helpful for a particular subject. So let's say you're a biological sciences major. Again, this will look a little bit different if you're on a laptop or have a full screen monitor. But this is going to tell you which databases are best for your particular major or for the class you're taking. And we'll also give you some resources on sort of other things like how to read a scientific article. Research starters tend to be things like encyclopedias that we would recommend. So we have basically curated all these resources that are particular to the biological sciences. If we go back to this page here, you'll notice there's also a course guides tab, and we don't have course guides for every single course, but a lot of us who work with specific classes and do library instruction will create these course guides. So for example, I have created the EDU 516 Lit 530 guide for master's students in education. And I have sort of reiterated their assignment and have specific resources for particular parts of their assignment that have to do with library research. And you can see there's kind of some overlap, I think, between what the Writing Center does and what we do. Both of us can help you understand the assignment and come up with some ideas, and hopefully with your thesis as well. So the benefit of Brightspace actually is you will see in every single course there's a tab that says library resources at the top. If there is a course guide available for that class, it will show up automatically when you click on that. And if there isn't one and you click on library resources, it'll take you to the appropriate subject guide. So let's say you're taking a geology class and we don't have a course guide. If you clicked on library resources, it would take you right to the geology research guide. We also have how-to guides, which are basically, they're a mix of sort of research-based kind of things like conducting a literature review, reading a scholarly article, but then we also have what I think of as more, not necessarily technology, but maybe more practical things like how do you actually find the books? You know, let's say you do want to come in and actually find a book on the shelves. This will explain how to do that. And things like requesting things we don't have is another one. Let me go back here. So like requesting book chapters for books that we might not have, and maybe you want a chapter for your research. So there are those kinds of things. And the last thing that I really wanted to point out is the Chat with a Librarian tab, which is at the bottom of all of our library homepages. It should be also on all the guides as well. You know, the course guides and the how-to guides. It is, you may not see the tab in some of our databases, but we do try to add a link to this service in the databases whenever we have the ability to change those settings. But basically, this is a 24/7 service. You can also access it by clicking Ask a Librarian 24/7 on the homepage. And this chat box will connect you with a librarian. If it is within our hours, we will be the people answering it. And when I say we, I mean the librarians at Oswego or our peer reference assistants who are students. Again, they're trained to answer these kinds of questions, but also to refer things to a librarian if they need to. And if it is outside of our hours, then you can connect to our Ask Us 24/7 service. And basically that will connect you with a librarian somewhere else in the world. And they can help you with things like citations, pretty much anything we can help you with, you know, finding specific articles. A lot of times they have access to our logins, and many of them have the same sort of databases that we have. So they may be familiar with the database that you are looking for. And we actually do the same. We have a few of our librarians who have shifts on this service. And it's kind of fun because I get to answer questions from people in England very frequently. And they often have citation questions. And we can be reached, we can set up a meeting, you can set up a one-on-one meeting. Those can be in person, but they don't have to be. We're happy to meet over Zoom or Google Meet. And you can call us, text us, email us. So we are very available in a lot of different ways. And like I just want to emphasize that there is a librarian available 24/7. I know that as somebody who was both a traditional age college student and put things off to the last minute when I was in college, and much more recently when I was getting my master's, you know, I was still working full time here at the library. So I understand that in both of those cases, it can sometimes be hard to contact the library during normal hours. So I just want to make sure you guys know that service is available, and that is all I have. So I will stop sharing my screen now.
Thanks, Laura. I think that was a really great way to end that too, because I think that is probably the most helpful resource to let students know you don't have to remember everything that you just went through when you get on the page and you just don't know where to start. You can reach out to somebody to sort of kickstart your research and get you sort of pointed in the right direction. So I think that's great.
Thanks.
So Steve, back to you. I don't know if you have any points that while Laura was presenting that maybe sparked something that you wanted to chime in on, or if there were any other pieces that you wanted to touch on today.
Yeah, I mean, this is probably something that the students have heard over and over again, but you know what? I need to say it anyway, because then I'll feel better, is planning is so incredibly important. As a writer myself, I know what it's like to procrastinate. You know, I was a writing major as an undergraduate and as a graduate student. And even though I love writing, there were sometimes courses that I had to write in that I wasn't, you know, really all that interested, but I knew I had to do it. And those were the courses that I would quite often procrastinate on. It's like, oh, I got this research paper I have to write for this particular course. It's not, you know, it's not fun writing that I like to do. I mean, I'm going to work on these other writing assignments that I have in these other courses that I have more interest in. Well, of course, what you're doing is you're digging yourself in deeper. I can't stress all the more the importance of getting to know your writing assignments and all of your syllabi semester to semester, and really putting some careful thought into what those writing assignments are, what they entail, get an idea for how labor intensive they might be, how, maybe really challenging they might be, because of, the anticipated work involved. I mean, obviously, if you're asked to go to a play and then write like a one-page reflection paper based on that play, that's a little bit more of an informal writing assignment as opposed to having to write a 10 or 12-page research paper, something to do with the Civil War for a history class, where you have to have a minimum of maybe like 5 sources and so on. So I think it's really important to know those writing assignments and what kind of time you're going to have to spend on those writing assignments, and get started on them early. One of the things that I used to really try to do, courses that I didn't find maybe quite as interesting as other courses where I would have to write, I did more of this when I got into grad school. Even though I was still focusing on English and writing in grad school, there were still some literature courses that, I wasn't really all that fond about, but I knew I had to write papers in there. So I would try to work on those course assignments first and get a jump on those, and then actually kind of reward myself writing in the courses that I found more interesting, like my creative writing courses, my fiction writing courses, instead of like maybe my 17th century British literature course or something along those lines. So that's really huge. And I think it's really important to have like all kinds of places where you do your planning. One of the things that I use often is a desk calendar in my office and at home, because if I write things on a big desk calendar every day, that's staring me in my face when I sit down at my desk. I also do a lot with Post-it notes. I'm not really one to put reminders on a phone and so on. That really doesn't work for me, but that might work for you. So I think having several different areas where you can have your plans written out is always going to be helpful, whether it's some form of technology that you're using or things like desk calendars, wall calendars, Post-it notes, notebooks, the old composition notebooks, and you just keep track of day-to-day tasks that you need to do that way. But I think a lot of students who come into the writing center, they come in and they're all frustrated quite often. It's like they think it's the end of the world, this paper they have to write. A lot of it is it's not careful planning. They're actually pretty good writers. Most of the students who come in here, even if they think they're just not taking the time to really think about how involved their various writing assignments are and how to plan accordingly. And the writing tutors, I tell them all the time, if you need to stop helping somebody with a particular paper because you need to talk about helping that student plan better, by all means do that. And we do that quite often in the writing center. I really think that students need that little bit of a confidence boost, that somebody else has experienced the kinds of frustrations and challenges that they are, but there's ways to work around those challenges and frustrations with careful planning. I don't know, Sarah and Laura, you had the right. Can you relate to what I'm saying about how important planning is? And the two of you were guilty of probably procrastinating, from time to time, just like me. And what are some of the things that you think about doing even now in a job in the workplace, where you have something that needs to, some kind of writing that you have to do for something that's job related, like some kind of an event or something like that? What are some suggestions that you might have for the students?
Well, Steve, before I answer that question, I wanted to back up a little bit, because what you were saying reminded me of something that I would want to emphasize, which is that your professors are just people too. They're not perfect. And, sometimes we don't read things the most carefully as carefully as we should. And your professors are guilty of that too. Waiting till the last minute, your professors are guilty of that too. So just keep that in mind, that they're human, and they may not write the clearest assignments. So if you have questions about the assignment, that may not be you. That may be, maybe they did not write the assignment clear enough. I just recently worked on an assignment with a bunch of students with two professors who I actually really admire and really like. But looking at that assignment, I was thinking, maybe I'd change this part, maybe I'd change this part, because students had a difficult time with that. So those are, again, two professors who I think are excellent professors here. But like I said, we're all human. So that's all I have to say about that. Let me think about your questions, though.
I mean, I certainly can chime in. I remember what it was like to have a 10-page paper sort of looming out there in the distance. And it really does come back to that planning piece, because Steve, even if I hadn't written a sentence in that 10-page paper, I almost felt that sense of calm if I had my resources, if I had printed out my materials, if I had my books, and I sort of read through that and had an idea, maybe even worked on a really basic outline of how I wanted to kind of address each of those resources throughout my paper, so that I sort of knew, okay, all of my materials are there. I have an idea of how I want to lay it out. And even though I might wait till 2 nights before the paper is due to start writing that paper, it was not necessarily the writing that was the most, I guess, scary part of the whole situation. Was just making sure that you had all of the resources and everything available to you at that time, so that when you sat down and you focused, you could spend a few hours and really just knock it out and get to it. So I think doing that research, getting your materials, having that sort of plan of how you're going to be outlining that paper, I think that is really key to helping relieve some of that anxiety and stress over writing a paper like that. So I appreciate you speaking to that.
And you know what it is too, when we start early, Laura and Sarah, when we start working on a writing assignment early, I like how you discover the obstacles that you're going to encounter too, because sometimes we can't even think about what potential obstacles we're going to encounter either when we start writing. And so that's why starting something early is nice, because you run into these problems and it gives you time perhaps to go and talk to the professor. If something's really seems troublesome, you've got time to talk to that professor and still let that, work on that paper. You've got ample time to come to the writing center if you can physically come to the writing center and work with one or more of the writing tutors. Use Thinking Storm early on, so you can start getting feedback on your papers. And the revision process too, students don't realize, I don't think, how important the revision process is. And getting a paper done early enough so you can get away from that paper for like sometimes a couple days even, and then come back to it with a more objective eye. And I'm guilty of working on a paper a couple days before it's due, maybe even the night before it's due. And once in a while, that paper will still be successful, probably more so than not. You're going to get a grade that you're really not happy with. But if you had started that paper early, it allows you to have that, what I call cooling off period, where you can step back from that paper, hopefully a day or more, and go back to it with a more objective eye. You're almost like a stranger the longer you get away from something that you're working on, and then you read it later. And you might think you just wrote the best thing ever. And then, the next day, 12 hours or more later, you look at it again, it's like, oh, this isn't as good as I thought it was. Or it might be the opposite. I've written things that I thought, well, this is all right. And then went back to it later, maybe a day or more later. It's like, hey, this has got a lot of potential. I didn't really think about that when I was, now that I've gotten away from it, I really think this can really be a successful piece that I'm working on.
I really liked what you had to say, Sarah, because one thing that I want to specifically call out here is this idea of anxiety. because I'm someone who has suffered from anxiety for quite a long time. First dealt with it in college and didn't know what it was. And there's anxiety, it's very common for anxiety to exist around certain types of things. There's actually been articles written about library anxiety. Lots of people have test anxiety, and I would not be at all surprised if there's actual research about writing anxiety too. And some of the things that Sarah was talking about, like having that sort of rough idea, even if you haven't written anything, if you've had a chance to look over your sources and stuff, and you just have that rough idea. I know for me, when I did that, I felt a lot less anxious and a lot less stressed because I
Right.
had a direction, and all I had to do was keep walking in that direction and, write the paper. And I know, as I don't know who's going to watch this, but of those of you who may not may be working full time or have to, fit in your schoolwork around other commitments, I think that if you can do some of that sort of pre-work, doing the research, look, maybe you've got those 5 articles, maybe, read one article one day, and another article the next day. But breaking it down, I think, and just having that idea of where you're going to go with the paper can really, I think, reduce that anxiety.
I've worked with many students in the academic advising realm where just over across the board in planning for their classes and sort of balancing all of their coursework, they quite often I'll hear, well, I just lie to myself and I'll tell myself that this assignment is due a week prior to when it really is. I'll put it, in red bolded letters on my calendar or in my reminder electronically. And so when they see that due date coming up, they're like, well, that's when I need to get it done by. And they really just adhere to that, so that it does give you a little bit more leeway in if you do have to reach out for clarification, or if you're having a hard time accessing a resource or whatever it may be. So yeah, really just kind of maybe bumping up those, due dates and giving yourself that leeway and some buffer time. So.
Yeah, and one of the things that talking to a lot of the stronger writers who come into the writing center, and even the writing tutors who are very proficient writers themselves, a lot of them they'll set a date, like if it's a really involved paper, by this date I want to be this far along in my paper. By this date, I want to be at this stage in the paper. And they're actually putting this down on a calendar, they're putting it in their phones, on a desk calendar. There's some way of monitoring that progress. And it's like it's in their head that, oh, I need to have my thesis statement, really secure by this particular date. And it's in their mind that it's like, oh, I got to get that done by this date because I need to have that thesis statement secured before I can really start really carefully going back into my resources now and seeing what resources are going to help back up, support my thesis statement. So I think that's something that's worth trying to do too. Easier said than done, but I think we need to really make a conscious effort to do that. Really plan accordingly, step by step through all the different stages of a paper.
And if you Google the phrase assignment calculator, there are a few colleges out there who have basically, you type in, I think, the due date, and it will sort of map out those steps for you and like how long. And of course, you can always modify these. If you're like, what, I have a lot of trouble with the research part, maybe I need to give more time for that. But it's somewhere to start. And one thing I wanted to add about planning ahead and using, Steve was saying, use what works for you. A desk calendar would not work for me, but it works for Steve. And, I use an app, and that won't work for a lot of people. But the thing that I guess I wanted to add onto that too is that mix things up, because I used to be a paper planner person up until about a year ago, and now I've been using an app, and I like it a lot. So and that's something I think throughout your life, as these circumstances, you may have different responsibilities in a job, when you move from one job to another, and what worked for you before may not work for you then. Maybe you'll find what worked for you as a first year doesn't work for you as a junior or senior, and that's totally okay. Just find what works for you. You don't have to stick with something that's not working for you. So
well, I think these were all really amazing pieces that we've touched on today. Hopefully some students can take some, of these things away and, really use it towards their own, research and writing and coursework. So I thank you so much, Steve and Laura, for participating with us today. This is the first semester that we're trying our adult student assistance program. And so we hope to have you back in the future should we, continue to do the same kind of format. And it's nice to know that there are individuals out there that we can reach out to and students can reach out to, adult learners and our distance learners. So now that they have some faces to put to some names and know that you can really help them through the process, and at least point them certainly in the right direction to get them that help. So thank you so much. I think we're going to stay on for the next 5 minutes, just in case anyone should pop in with any final questions. But